That's good. Just to remind members, if you could mute when you're not speaking, and also it may be easier for members if you come off camera as well when you're not speaking, just so that we because it can be a bit disconcerting. Excellent. Right. Well, let's start. Welcome to the meeting, the Development Management Committee meeting for Wednesday, the 28th of April. I'm just going to run through a few protocols. I appreciate to members that you all know exactly what I'm going to say. You've heard it all before, but this is for the benefit of members of the public that are listening in. So each application will go through a set procedure. And that is that the planning officer will make a presentation of that application. At that point, we will members of the committee can ask points for clarification. We'll then move to speakers, so that's objectors, supporters, parish council and ward members, and they will all have 3 minutes usually, but if it's a major application, 5 minutes. Both of these applications this morning are majors, so speakers will have 5 minutes. They will be timed, and at the end of 5 minutes there'll be a quiet word, and we will ask them to finish off as quickly as possible. After each of those presentations, again, members of the committee will be able to ask questions of those speakers. Once that's all finished, we will then move into the debate about the application. During the debate, it'll be proposed and seconded one way or the other, or deferral or site visit or whatever. That will be voted on by the committee, and that will then be decided. Right, I hope that's clear about each application. Just a few other housekeeping points. If a member of the committee drops out during the debate, we will suspend the meeting while we try and get them back in. Members of the committee have to be aware of everything that's said about every single application in order to vote on them. If they aren't, then they can't do that. So apologies about that in advance if we have any problems. I'm sorry to say that if members of the public drop out, then we will continue with the meeting. On occasion, when it's a blanket, all members of the public drop out, we will stop the meeting at that point and try and resolve any technical issues. Right, we will do a roll call at the beginning of the meeting, just to check that we're all here, by Miss Young, and that also confirms that we're quorate. Miss Young, I assume will advise the speakers in and out as and when. I think I've covered everything that I want to. Miss Young, please remind me if I've missed anything vital out. Otherwise, we'll proceed on to the agenda.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. So before we move on to the agenda, Miss Young, if you could just do a roll call of members of the committee, please. Thank you.
Councillor Abbott.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Foss.
Present.
Councillor Hodgson.
Present.
Councillor Hallway.
Present.
Councillor Kemp.
Present.
Councillor Long.
Present.
Councillor Pannell.
I'm present but having trouble, and I'm onto IT at the moment, but I can hear all discussion at the moment.
Thank you. Do let us know if you drop out on it.
Yeah, no,
Councillor Pringle.
It's in my mouse.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
I'm present, but also, well, at present, I can see Julian on my screen and he's asleep.
I can assure you I'm not asleep, though.
That's better. I can see you now, but yeah,
Okay.
it's not a very good reception. from there.
No, Councillor Rowe, his video is stalling at times, but he's still there and able to hear.
All right.
Councillor
that's good.
Taylor,
Present.
thank you. That's all in, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms Young. That's excellent. We'll now move on to the agenda items. Agenda item 1, minutes to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held by the committee on the 31st of March. Are there any amendments, alterations, or can I sign those as a correct record?
So moved, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Right, I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything in the conversation box, so thank you very much. I will take that as correct. Urgent business. I'm not aware of any urgent business that needs to be brought forward. Division of the agenda. Again, I'm not aware of any exempt information that may be disclosed, so there should be no reason to divide the agenda. Declaration of interests, members. Members, please, if you'd like to declare any declarations of interest in any of the applications, please, or
yes,
any
Chairman.
items on the agenda.
Please,
Councillor
Chairman.
Taylor.
Yeah, 6C3504 HHO AOMB, and that's my it's a personal interest in the AOMB.
Thank you.
Can I declare the same interest too, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Any more interest for anyone else? No. Excellent. Public participation. Move on to item 5. Public participation. Sorry. There is a list of speakers that has been circulated. I will call those, or Ms Young will call those speakers as and when their particular item is being discussed. Item 6, planning applications. So we'll move straight on to 6A, planning application 384220/OPA. I just see Councillor Hodgson, you wish to say something.
Yes, Chairman. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my. That's it. Yes, I wish to make a point, a very serious point about both 6A and 6B, and this is with reference to an independent ecological assessment that's been carried out which has looked at both those sites plus another site which was known as for the land south of Sawmills Field, which is an associated site, so that all three are Baker sites. And an independent ecological assessment was carried out because there were serious concerns in the community about the ecological assessments that had been submitted by a company called EAD who were commissioned by Baker's Estates for the three sites. This independent assessment has essentially seriously called into question the ecological report on the what was called the Attenuation site, but it also makes comments about these two sites. Would you permit me, Chairman, to just read out a brief summary that just is from somebody called John Day, who's an independent ecologist. I believe he actually might be present at the meeting, because I think this is very serious, and I think it means that we maybe need to ensure that we have the full information that we should have about the implications for ecology, obviously, which I know that not only the members present today, but also our joint local plan sought to ensure protection for. Will you permit me to just read out a quick summary?
Yeah, Councillor Hodgson, can I just say that Mr. Day is actually one of the speakers.
Okay. But what I would like to propose, what I'm leading towards, Chairman, is that I think because there's inadequate information, I actually think that both 6A and 6B should both be deferred on the basis of the EAD ecology reports being potentially unsound because of the assessments that have been done and looked at, which pulls it all into question.
That's fine. So you'd like to propose a deferral of both these applications?
Yes. Because I think they need an independent assessment.
Do you have a seconder for that proposal?
Can I invite any member of the committee to second that proposal, please?
So, I mean, Councillor Hodgson, I'm afraid you don't seem to have a seconder for that proposal. Look, I appreciate that it's a very highly charged and passionate, very passionate about it. But look, I think these issues can be discussed during the debate, and members will make their mind up as to. We've got, as I say, we've got Mr. Day. You will make your presentation. We've got the county biodiversity specialists. So I think we've got enough to go ahead, and members will make their mind up. So I'm afraid that we'll have to move on from there. Councillor Rowe, did you still wish to speak, or of not anymore?
I was just going to say that we did receive very long emails and letters from Mr. Day, and also one or two other persons from that area have sent us emails with a lot of information in. So we are aware of this separate assessment, Councillor Hodgson. I'll just leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, in which case, thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. We will move on to the application and over to who am I asking for now? It's the planning officer. So it's Bryn. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chairman.
Kitching.
Yeah, so my name is Mr. Kitching. I'm a planning officer for the council, and I'm going to present to you two applications this morning regarding two sites in Dartington. The first one being Broome Park, and the second one being Sawmills. Two separate applications, but submitted alongside each other, and by the same applicants on two allocations within Dartington itself. So the first application is application 3842/20/OPA, an outline application at Broome Park, Dartington. So the application site forms part of an allocation in the local plan. So the joint local plan allocates a number of sites in Dartington under policy TTV 24. And the sites we're looking at, first of all, at Broome Park is TTV 24 (5). This area of land here, it's about a six hectare allocation in total. So there's brown land here, northern side of Dartington, and the local plan allocates that for in the region of 80 houses. The application site, as shown on your report, is here. So we have the main road, the A384, running alongside the site, access point in off that main road. We have the school site just to the south. We have Broome Park, a residential development to the northeast. We have the hamlet of Week over, the northwest. We have the hamlet of Week over to the west. And then down towards the south, we have the Bidwell Brook and playing fields here. Another thing I'll point out is the St Mary's Church, which is here. And I'll show you, we'll talk about that more as part of the presentation. So, as I said, policy TTV 24 of the JLP, Joint Local Plan, allocates a number of sites in the smaller towns and key villages, Dartington being one of those. I think in total it allocates about 910 houses across that area, the smaller towns, key village area, of which I think there are some sites which relate to Dartington. Site number 5, Broome Park, is for the estimated provision of 80 homes, and it has a number of policy requirements in terms of having footpath cycle access links to the main road and connecting to the national cycle network. It's about having an overall site layout and design that respects the setting of the existing housing at Broome Park. That was the housing to the northwest of the site. The retention and future management of the hedgerow along the western boundary, so between the site and Week. We have additional strategic landscaping on the western side to soften the edges of development onto the undeveloped countryside beyond. We require appropriate flood risk mitigation measures And we also require an acceptable impact on the setting of St Mary's Church to the east, more to the northeast of the application site, which necessitates both strategic landscaping that's sensitive to this context, as well as an appropriate extent, scale, layout, design and materials. So the application site I outlined red here. This is a plan from the design and access statement. You will see that that site, or that red line, does not extend to the field boundaries, and it does not extend to the overall allocation, which I showed you in brown a moment ago. That is because, as part of the application, mitigation is required to have dark corridors for bat flyways. So these dark corridors are 20 metres on the northern boundary and 10 metres on the southern boundary. So the application does not include those as part of the red line. So if approved, no development could take place in those areas. So all built form would have to be within the red line. But it would also be possible to secure the mitigation in terms of landscaping and use of those areas to provide a suitable habitat or suitable structure, planting structure, to retain them as a dark corridor for bat flyways. The application site, so this is quite a recent aerial photograph, I think from June last year, showing the field. The field is currently ploughed, and I think that's what's shown in this photo. So we have the site being in this field here, but as I said, we have a 10-metre buffer along the edge of the field on this side, and 20 metres across the west and northern boundaries, including around the dwelling here and around the cemetery. So just in a bit more detail, that's the site. You can see the school to the southeast, and Broom Park to the northwest. The cemetery is here, the church just off plan here, and if I overlay that, you can see where the red line is in terms of the extent of the development being proposed, or the extent of the outline development being proposed. So this land here, blue land, outside of the application site, but under the control of the applicant. There's quite a lot of land under the control of the applicants here, because it's the Dartington Hall Trust in partnership with Baker Estates who are submitting the application. So this is just to show for context the red line site here, and so you can see the other land which is in the ownership or under the applicant's control, being the Dartington Hall estate. We have a sloping site, generally level on access. So we have the access point here. This is where the temporary school was located for a period of time while building works took place on the school site. So generally flat on entry, drops down, and then starts to rise up. So the highest part of the site being towards Broom Park. So this is the highland on here, and then it's sloping down towards the Bidwell Brook here, and this blue line here is showing the position of the flood zones, flood zone 2 and 3. So we're outside of the flood zones from the Bidwell Brook there, but that's just to give idea. The contours are shown there to give members an idea of the lie of the land in terms of it having to. It slopes up towards Broom Park, plateaus around this point, and then starts sloping down towards Week to the west. Just showing you an indicative plan here. So this was submitted as part of the design and access statement. We are not determining things like layout, appearance, design, materials, anything at this stage. We are purely looking to determine the principle of development for up to 80 dwellings.
Kitchen, could I ask you to halt for the moment, please? And I would ask IT if we can just double check that we've got Councillor Brown, as he's showing offline now.
I'm here.
Great,
Hello?
thank you very much. Sorry,
Yeah, I'm
Mr.
here.
Kitchen. Please continue.
Yes, so as said, the plan is an indicative plan. We're not determining a layout at this stage. What we are determining is the principle of development for up to 80 dwellings, but we're also going to be determining the detail of the access point at this point here, a single access point here. So this was submitted as part of design and access statement to give an idea of how that layout could work. Things like this area here showing as potential for allotments within that green buffer. Obviously the buffer all the way around the development, showing some sort of sight lines across to the church and also across to Yana Beacon, and then also green space within the development as well. This is the green infrastructure plan, so it just pares that back slightly in terms of not having the suggested layouts or anything like that. So the yellow orangey area being the developable area within the site, areas of green space potentially here in the centre, but again not determining that at this stage, and potential for green space down in the south here where suggested attenuation pond is shown on the lowest part of the site. Just going to show you this from the submitted ecological constraints and opportunities plan as part of the application, showing the buffers in terms of that can be new sort of wildflower meadow, scrub buffer. It would need to be something that can restrict the amount of light spill into that area, so it is low. It also needs to do something in terms of its provision of planting to provide an appropriate sort of habitat and corridor for the greater horseshoe bats that are located at the SAC about 3.8 miles or 3.8 kilometres away. Also talks about things like potential for hedgehog passes, the dark corridors, bat and bird and insect boxes on all new dwellings, all new buildings, and provision of allotments here. I've just mentioned the bats. So we have the SAC about 3.8 kilometres away. Bats, greater horseshoe bats, do use this field for sort of foraging and commuting. And one of the requirements from Natural England would be to have a suitable buffer around those edges, a dark corridor where light would be kept to less than 0.5 lux. That corridor would have to be a minimum of 20 metres wide on the northern boundary here, and a minimum of 10 metres wide on the southern here. This plan also shows where hedgerows are in the lighter green are retained and enhanced, and in the darker green where new hedgerows would need to be planted in order to maintain that dark corridor. So this area would be no residential development within that, so that's no houses or gardens. It is effectively open space. So following a number of the consultation responses, I've required the submission of a parameter plan to help set a bit of a framework on an outline application where things like the layout, design, etc. are not for consideration. So basically, to convince me that it is possible to fit 80 dwellings on that site in an acceptable manner, which is not going to have adverse impacts on the character of the area, including Week, Broome Park, impacts on the setting of St Mary's Church and other listed buildings also in Week, in terms of position of potential attenuation water, surface water attenuation field, attenuation water basin, attenuation of the water, the runoff, the surface water runoff from the site, also showing potential area for if on-site children's play were to be provided. This plan shows the access point here. It shows screening and a setback, so development would not come right up to the road, So we'd have a green setback of a development with access coming in here, and then the different colours relate to different potential densities of development. So on the higher land, I would be saying a sort of the lower density development, and then a slightly higher density on the lower land. In terms of numbers here, we're talking about a site which is about 4 hectares in size and 80 dwellings. So we're talking about 20 units per, an overall density of about 20 dwellings per hectare, which is a low density in itself. So up here, that would be sort of less than that 20, whereas over here, I think you could potentially push it to higher, and that would be an appropriate response to ensuring that we have soft edges to the countryside beyond, and how we can also reduce impacts on the setting of Broome Park itself. I mentioned that we're here to determine the detailed design of the access at this stage, and here's the plan showing that new access. So it is a new T-junction going in here with a right turn lane. So the road would need to be widened to the point to get in a central right turn lane. So we're in a 30-mile-an-hour zone across the site, but taking vehicles out of the sort of main carriageway into the centre before turning right into the site there. So that is a area of detail which we're being asked to approve at this stage. Obviously, from this point onwards, that is then reserved for future consideration, although it's pretty obvious that the road would start off by continuing along the application edge site here, with potential for residential to the south there. Just some photographs of that where that access point is. We're talking about where about this pole is here. So this is looking from the north. So that I have the churches to my back. Just to the right here, you can see the edge of the cemetery. This is the site where the temporary location of the school went, and this would be the site access here. And then looking back up the road, so the site is on the left here. Access point, it's about this point here. You see the church in the background there. This is the national cycle route here and pedestrian walkway. So that would be retained, yet but pushed over slightly. So that would be retained and go into the site, meeting one of those policy requirements I mentioned earlier. But road carriageway widened, but that pathway being retained as well. Also, as part of the application are some off-site highway works. You'll see from my report, including the provision of a zebra crossing. So we have the application site here. We have walking routes, which down through, through the site down the A384 and the 385 here. So we have pedestrian routes all the way around here. There's also one which cuts through into the playing fields here. And we have the post office petrol filling station as well in this location. So it's proposed to put in a zebra crossing at that point. So playing fields on my left, looking down towards the petrol filling station's community shop. And at this point here, a zebra crossing is proposed to be put in to improve connectivity in terms of the people who would be living in the development and their ability to get to some of the shops and services in that area. This is a design of the zebra crossing, just in this location here. So that could be secured by condition, with maintenance also secured by Section 106 agreement, a maintenance fee by 106. In terms of drainage of the site, the application is accompanied by a drainage strategy. It is not to determine the detailed drainage design at this stage, because we can't do that until you know your layout of houses, etc. But the drainage strategy suggests that the mixture of infiltration on the site and potential attenuation through an attenuation pond which could then be discharged at the Greenfield runoff rate into the Bidwell Brook to the south. The attenuation pond, if required, would definitely have to be down in this area here, on the lowest part of the site, but outside of the flood zone for obvious reasons. But so this is part of to demonstrate that it can be attenuated on site and then released into the drainage network where the Greenfield runoff already goes, and that can be done at a rate which takes into account climate change as well. A few photographs of the site. So this is a photograph from just inside the where the access would come through. So looking across the site, the cemetery's off to the right, the school's off to the left, Yarna Beacon in the distance there, and Broome Park housing here. Week, the hamlet of Week drops down, is down in the hollow beyond the site. So this being the application site in front, and this area here, and that also shows you where that higher land is I mentioned. Stood on that higher land, looking back towards the 385. We have the road here. This is where the access point would come in. You see the school on the right, the cemetery, and St Mary's Church there, and then there would be a 20-metre buffer around this side and a 10-metre buffer around the school side. Stood in the same point, looking backwards now towards Broome Park. This is taken approximately 20 metres away from that boundary, so everything you see in front would be sort of it's outside of the application site and would be in that 20-metre buffer. So that shows the housing at Broome Park. And then wandering further along the field, Broome Park's off to the right. So this is looking down into the hamlet of Week and Yarna Beacon beyond. Again, we have a buffer here and the policy requirement for strategic landscaping to ensure that the development doesn't creep towards Week and start changing the character of the hamlet there. And then now I'm looking, so I've got Week behind me. You just see the school sites here. So we're on the lower land. This is down in the area where that attenuation pond would be located, so the lowest part of the site. You see that it is it's quite young woodland here, and as part of the proposal would be the securing of landscape ecology management plan and a woodland management plan to enhance and improve this area of land for part of the biodiversity net gain requirements of the site. And that's just looking into that woodland, so you can get a feel for what it is at the moment. So it's quite young, probably about 10 years old, and yeah, that could be, we could secure a woodland management plan as part of a 106 as a 106 requirement to ensure that we can do the biodiversity net gain and biodiversity improvements required as part of the habitats regulations assessments which we've carried out. In terms of I also mentioned settings of listed buildings and settings of the church. This is one of our requirements when looking at the application. Obviously, it's in outline, so we've got some areas where we can't do that in full until we know the detailed design, but we can assess it on the basis of the parameters that we have put forward as part of the application, including those buffers and those development areas. So this is from just within the entrance of the site. So all this in front would be buffer, but you can see the church there. So trying to making sure that any development doesn't harm or it doesn't significantly harm the setting of the heritage asset there, and if it does, which we consider there might be some minor insignificant harm, that the benefits of the development outweigh those impacts. And here's a view from the church itself, looking back towards the development site. Cemeteries on the right here. The start of the site is in about this location here. So that was looking towards this part of the site here. So in the round, we have an outline application for up to 80 dwellings, and we need to be satisfied that 80 dwellings can satisfactorily be accommodated on that site in such a way where it's not going to harm the have wildlife biodiversity impacts and harms, not having harms on the setting of listed buildings and heritage assets, not having adverse impacts on the dwellings at Broome Park or over in Week as well. And we also need to balance that against the benefits being put forward as development. Obviously, this is an allocated site for 80 dwellings, so it is a site in the local plan which we expect to come forward for development. The application meets the numbers set out in the plan. The affordable housing provision is the full policy requirement of 30 dwellings per 30% of the dwellings would be affordable housing, including a mixture of social, rented and intermediate housing. The affordable housing officer is happy with that proposal. And then we also have, as part of the application, secure appropriate mitigation in terms of impact on the bats and the SAC, and you'll see from the reports that I've included the habitats regulations assessment, which includes those mitigation features, including these buffer zones. And I think in total, working out that green space buffer, which is around the edge of the development here, we're talking about 2 hectares of green space here around the edge, with the development taking up about 4 hectares of an overall site of about 6. So we've got some significant green space around the edge of the development, which would need to feed through and into the development as part of that layout at a reserved matters stage. So I'm not going to go through all the sections of my report, because members will have seen that and read all those points. But we have an application which meets the policy, the allocation policy requirements insofar as it can as an outline application. It's the full provision of affordable housing, so it's meeting those local housing needs that are set out in the plan, and there is appropriate mitigation would need to be secured, or the mechanisms to mitigate need to be secured at this stage through Section 106 agreement. So the recommendation would be to, as set out in the report, where I've put in some quite detailed heads of terms in terms of under these topic headings, that we'll get the full provision of affordable housing, 30%, that we get the full plan requirement of open space, accessible new natural green space within the development. We secure equipped play, either by on-site or contributions towards enhancing the facilities at nearby facilities at the Meadowbank. Either or would be appropriate in this case. We get appropriate contributions towards sports facilities, provisions of allotments. We secure a travel plan. We secure contributions towards primary healthcare, so that is towards increasing capacity at local doctors' surgeries. The 106 would need to secure all the ecological mitigation measures as set out in the habitats regulations assessment in terms of the LEMP and KEMP, and then also securing the contribution towards the future maintenance of the zebra crossing. The provision of the zebra crossing can be secured by Section 106. There is one update I need to make to the report following the submission of some information which, although I think had been submitted, had not found its way through to the application from the NHS Devon Clinical, the Torbay and South West NHS Foundation Trust. So the NHS have submitted 2 responses, one about increasing capacity at primary healthcare facilities, which is included in my report and recommendation. The other was requesting contribution towards a financial contribution towards mitigating the impact of the funding gap between new residents occupying new dwellings and the way the trust is funded, which is agreed annually on a contract-based system based on previous year's activity. So effectively, it's to plug the funding gap in revenue to provide health services. That's something which has been considered previously on a number of sites in the southwest, and on this site we don't have the policy backing for this in terms of it. Our policies don't include that sort of revenue fund required to meet revenue funding, and then also we're in a circumstance where this is a known development because it is an allocated site. It is of no surprise that there will be additional residents in the area for the purposes of calculating funding for the NHS. This should be built into their modelling of how they are funded. And there was a very recent appeal decision in the neighbouring authority towards Newton Abbot at Walborough, where the inspector and the Secretary of State concluded that it cannot be justified to require a developer to plug a gap in funding, essentially to pay staff wages, even though it might be due to some element of new population which moves into the area, but because it being a known development as part of the plan, then it would not be appropriate to secure that. So I don't consider it that meets the appropriate test for Regulation 122 of Section 106 and the SIL tests, and therefore it is not something I can recommend that we secure. So I'm recommending we do take the money for increasing capacity at doctors' surgeries. That fits within our policy and our SPD, but the request for funding, which would be for Broome Park, £30,000 691, so £30,691 to plug that funding gap for 1 year, is not something that meets the test of 106 and therefore cannot be secured. So obviously quite a long detailed report over all these issues, but the overall recommendation is to delegate approval to the head of DM Development Management to grant that outline permission for 80 dwellings subject to the Section 106 agreement as set out in the report, and also as including the conditions as set out in the report. Happy to answer any members' questions on this, and I also have some of the consultees available today to answer any specific questions about areas in terms of highways. So we have a highways representative, the local lead flood authority, a Devon County Council representative, the ecology officer at Devon County Council. We have a policy planner here with us, and we also have hopefully have representatives from our environmental health departments in case members have any specific questions about any parts of the report. So that concludes my presentation, and as I say, the recommendation is to grant outline permission on the allocated site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Bryn. A quite detailed and extensive presentation there. Members, I have a few questions. First of all, Councillor Pannell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure some members may well have more wide-ranging points they wish to raise with you. Mine's a specific one on the drainage. I know that surface water drainage is a reserved matter. We have experienced difficulties as a committee on other applications where we have not been content with the scheme that is finally brought forward. What mechanism is there to make sure that members are able to understand, study and give consent to the scheme that is finally brought forward if there are any difficulties with it?
Yeah, so as you say, the surface water, obviously, if the detailed scheme can't be drawn up at this stage, that needs to be part of the reserved matters. We need to be satisfied that a detailed scheme, a suitable scheme can be achieved on this site. And as part of my recommendation, condition 18 of that is that either prior to or as part of the reserved matters, the following information should be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority, and that includes the detailed drainage design based upon the submitted flood risk assessment and drainage strategy that came with the outline. So that is so the detailed design of it, the detailed management of it, is proposed. The adoption maintenance of it, how exceedance flows will be dealt with, would all be required to be submitted either prior to or as part of the reserve matters. On the basis that it has to relate to the layout, which is a reserve matter, it really does have to come in as part of that reserve matters application, and therefore members would get to consider it at that stage. So it may be different from some other applications where sometimes it's required prior to commencement. On this application, I'm recommended that that information is submitted as part of the reserved matters, so it comes in at the same time as the layout, so members would be able to discuss, consider it at that stage.
So it will come back to committee at that stage.
Yes, I'm absolutely certain it would. Yes.
Thank you.
Because as a reserve matters application would end up back at the committee for members to decide.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
Hi there, hi Brent. Can we just have a look at that black and white picture with all the red border around it again, please? No, it wasn't that one. It was one that shows the woodland, but it was like a sepia type picture showing the corridor. Yeah, so that
delay on technology at the moment. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. Don't worry. I'm just looking at that red line, and there's a nice big fat gap between Broome Park, but then it seems to go into the woodland that's already there. And also the boundary on the bottom side is an awful lot closer to all the boundaries there, isn't it? So that drainage bit is going to go into the woodland. So you're going to be taking out some of those trees, or they are going to be taking out some of those trees.
Yeah. So
yes?
that indicative position of the drainage attenuation pond is in this area here. Yeah, you say that bulge. So that's what it's shown on that is indicative, which does include some of those areas of trees in that. So yes, it is potentially, although it is a reserve matters, going to result in the removal of some of those trees. But as part of the mitigation for that, I want to secure a woodland management plan which covers this entire area here. So within the blue land, but outside the application site, to improve that area, to make sure that not only will we just mitigate, that we also end up with a 10% improvement on biodiversity net gain. So
right, can I ask the age? Sorry, Bryn, can I just ask the age of those trees there? Do you know?
Those those trees, if I've been looking at aerial photographs over time, 10 years ago, or 10 years ago, I couldn't see any trees in this area at all. So we're quite young trees.
Right.
As in less, I'd say 10, certainly less than 15 years old. But going back over the historic aerial photographs, this area here, it's one where the current aerial photographs make it look slightly more dense than perhaps it really is. And certainly that's what I found from seeing it on aerial photograph to first going on site. But we're talking about 10 years, maximum 15.
Okay, and another question, if you will, is who is going to maintain that woodland?
Yeah, so as part of the requirement of the 106 would be the submission of a woodland management plan, which would include how that would be managed and maintained, and whether that be through the applicants themselves, the Hall Trust, whether that's a future management company. But at this stage, we don't know, because that needs to be drawn up. But at this stage, what I want to do is secure the mechanism to secure that, or secure the mechanism that requires the submission of the woodland management plan, which includes what will be done, who will do it, when will it be done, So that could be secured through
Right.
the legal agreement, but the detail of who exactly is going to do that is not for us to determine at this stage. But what I need to make sure is that we get something which means that we can enforce it at that later stage.
My concern is that that kind of thing definitely needs absolutely nailing down at the outset even.
Yeah, no, fair enough, Councillor Kemp, but that will come at the reserve matters stage. I think at this point in the outline, we're just setting up a mechanism so that we can bring that in. But that will definitely be a case of the reserve matters, as indeed will any attenuation pond and loss of trees. So yeah, are there any more questions you had?
But there's loads, but I'll wait for the discussion-y bit.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Bryn.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so just a sort of like just a small point really to start off. The first map in your presentation, the very first one, didn't show an updated map, and it actually missed out origins. And I think if we're looking at the overall kind of picture, no, not that one, it was the earlier one. It actually missed, that one shows origins, the site, which is sort of just due south of the site, and obviously Sawmillsville West is to the west of that. But your very first one doesn't show it at all. So I think it's important that that's actually, accurate when we show them. Next, if you could go to slide 7, which is the one that Councillor Kemp was just talking about, please.
So I don't have my slides numbered. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I can say it. Yeah.
Yeah, it says slide 7 at the bottom. So yeah, just to pick up that point about the attenuation pond, I'm just concerned that those younger trees that were shown in the photograph could easily be mitigation for some other development that's taken place. And this is really, when it was raised at the joint local plan about looking at the cumulative impacts of habitats, it was said that this isn't actually being assessed, and I think this puts us in grave danger. So to be actually saying that we need to do mitigation, but to actually be proposing to cut out trees, and I just want to understand why the attenuation pond can't be further north, just in other words above those trees, so it won't actually have to take out trees. But also, why is what's known as new best practice not being looked at here, which is the Environment Agency's natural flood management proposals, which actually puts strategic trees across steep sites on a slope, so that those trees form capillaries which can actually take water away before it even reaches the pond. So that should be a much more sophisticated development. And what really is a matter of concern, and that's why I'm raising this, is because when the origin site was being looked at, there was extreme concerns then about the impact on the junction, which we can see right in the middle of that map between the A384 and the A385, which is to the right of which is the shops at Dartington, which are right on the stream running through, and they have been put at risk before with flooding. And of course, we've got different assessments now with climate change. So I'd just like to know why the attenuation pond isn't put above the trees, and then the trees wouldn't have to be removed. And so if you could answer that question. And the other point I wanted to raise was, why doesn't the report refer to the fact that on the A385 is actually subject to an air quality management action plan, none of which has been rolled out? There's a whole load of proposals in there for how the air quality, which is on the 385 as it comes into Dartington, when it goes between Dartington and Bury Pomeroy, that way you've got your cursor there, is subject to this, and it's because of the sheer volume of traffic and the fact it's in a bit of a dip. And there's 2 families that have identified to myself in the last couple of years along that stretch of road within Dartington that they have asthma developing in children, and that this could be exposing the council potentially to quite a serious case, I would have thought, if we just keep on putting on traffic and saying it doesn't make any difference. So I just wonder why the Air Quality Management Action Plan wasn't included in your report. And the final point is, why isn't a second zebra crossing? If you're going across, I understand that you've got you're looking at having a right-hand feed into the site to assist with traffic management there on the A384. But why isn't there a proposal for a traffic island and a zebra crossing to enable people to go from the site across to the footpath, which runs across behind the the bank on the other side, which would allow people to have a bit more flexibility, because it's, you know, just putting them all onto that one site. And also I would suggest that the zebra crossing, could it be considered to have on the A385 as proposed? Should that not have, should that not have an island in it, because the traffic there is really hectic, and in fact so much so since Origins was developed that the lollipop lady resigned, and the children who go to the schools there tend to have the mum and dad taxi now, where they used to walk to school. So this is, you know, impacts of new housing is sort of unexpected consequences perhaps as well. Those are my questions.
No, thank you. Yeah, so the first question about the attenuation pond. So we have this area here where it is shown on the indicative plans to have attenuation pond. Yes, that is shown on the area of trees there. As I said previously, as the attenuation pond will need to be in the south for development for obvious reasons. If it requires an attenuation pond, it's going to need to be on the lowest part, the lower parts of the site. I don't see any reason why it has to be within those that treed area. Bear with me. So you show the contours here. I mean, if whether it requires an attenuation basin or not, obviously we want to see some attenuation, some infiltration on the higher parts of the site, and some sort of swales in terms of how that water is then transferred down the site throughout as part of drainage strategy. I don't personally see why it has to be within that tree area. If it got to the point where by doing that it was causing harm or adverse impact in terms of impacts on trees, then as part of that reserve matters we could be saying it needs to be out of that area, that needs to be kept free. So I think it's one of those where we need to be satisfied that it can be accommodated within the surface water, can be dealt with on the site. I do understand that concern about why put it in an area where it necessitates the removal of trees. It seems a sort of counterintuitive, but at this stage I think it's one where we can grant a consent on the basis that we know that it can be dealt with on site, but we don't necessarily have to agree that it definitely is going to result in the removal of trees. I think we have to deal with that as and when it comes up as part of a package of what is proposed, how big does it need to be, and and if it is going to result in the loss of trees, what are the mitigation measures against that, and consider that at that stage. So I think attenuation can be dealt with on site, but doesn't necessarily have to be in exactly the position which has been shown on the indicative plans, but does need to be in the south. So let's get back to. So you asked about the air quality. Obviously, the application is accompanied by an air quality assessment and an air quality strategy, which has been through to our environmental health team for consideration. That air quality management area, you say, is down the 385 in Totnes, and as part of the proposal, we've had to consider whether 80 dwellings here and in cumulative impact of assessment of other applications we're going to consider also today, whether that is going to result in any adverse impacts on that air quality management area. So those submitted reports are suggesting that it is a negligible impact based on the modelling and the results of monitoring of those areas, and that's been considered by our environmental health team, who have raised no objections to the proposals as part. So they have submitted the information. We've considered it in terms of our advice, and therefore my recommendation is that it is not going to result in any significant harm in terms of air quality management areas. And then the third point. Sorry, can you remind me your third point, Councillor Hodgson?
It was the zebra crossing.
Zebra crossing, yes. Yep.
Yeah, and also the access point as well.
Yeah. So dealing with the access point first of all. So the road at the moment is we only have pedestrian cycleway on one side of the road on the western side. To the east of the application site, there is no footway or cycleway, so there's nothing to link into. Where that footway, cycleway, or where a footway does start as part of a bus stop is in about this location here. So this is looking down at the site. So this is on the western side. You see nothing on that eastern side. I'm stood on a bank taking that photograph. But if I move back to this point here, you can see that there's nothing to link across to. So I don't see there's a requirement to put anything on that side. If we travel down that road to the roundabout here at the shops, that's where we do have a zebra crossing, is in this location here on the roundabout. And then we also have, there's a dropped curb sort of crossing point for the bus stops at this location here. So just off the north of this plan here, the bus stop on either side. So that is the only point of having a that's the only point where there is a pedestrian footway on the eastern side of the road. So I don't see that we'd be gaining anything by crossing to a point where there isn't anything to cross to.
Not a bus stop? You wouldn't want to cross to the bus stop?
So that point's, the bus stop's behind me at this point here, and that has a drop curb crossing point as already is already there. But actually if people are going to catch the bus, they have the opportunity to either go up to the bus stops here or go down to the next set further down in Dartington. So but it's not something which has been required from the Highways Authority as part of the transport assessment, and so it's not something which I'm pushing for, because I don't see any need for, if it's not backed up by the transport assessment. And then you asked about the zebra crossing. So we got this point here. So we got this informal crossing point here with the tactile paving drop curb. And what's proposed to put in there is the full Belisha Beacon zebra crossing point. We do have a representative from the Highways Authority here, if you have a specific detail on that, but that has been designed and been through safety audit, stage 1 safety audit, and passed that in terms of being a suitable crossing point on that road. So the 385, based on the vehicle speeds in the area and the amount of traffic. So that doesn't have any central reservation area, but it would be a straight zebra crossing with Belisha beacons. But we do have a representative from the Highways Authority here, should you have more detailed question on that.
I'd like to do that, please. Yes. So can I just ask more questions? Is this the time, Chairman, to ask? I presume it's Richard Jackson in the room.
Yeah. If Mr. Jackson's there, if we could have a quick update.
Yeah.
Just my own observation, Councillor Hodgson, is that if you do put a zebra crossing in further up, you'll have to have 24-hour lighting on it. We're trying to create dark areas. That's not exactly going to help.
I agree, but if people want to get the buses don't really run after 7 o'clock anyway, so you wouldn't need it to be lit. But it's really important that people can access the bus.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's it. It has to be lit 24 hours a day. You can't. Yeah, but they can be shaded down. They can be shaded. Can I just slightly reframe my question, since it will be to Mr. Jackson of Devon County Council Highways, because that particular crossing on the 385, which we're looking at the moment, that area is actually due for a further speed assessment. This has been overdue for about 2 years. So therefore I think we need to have that information before we reconsider. And as I say, bearing in mind that the lollipop lady just resigned because it was too dangerous to try and get children across, you do need an island there, because there is a huge amount of traffic is coming through there now, particularly since Beacon Park, which is further off down to the
the west of where we're looking is the west, which has opened up a lot, and so there's a lot of big vehicles coming through there, and they're not just cars. There's big lorries coming through, going off to Torbay, because this is the main route, obviously, through to Plymouth from there. So we do need an island if we're going to have safety, because there's all those schools that hasn't been pointed out.
Okay, Councillor Hodgson,
the other point, sorry, so if I can just add another point in terms of the crossing for the A384, which is to a bus stop. The other bus stop, which comes from the bus from Buckfastleigh, which is one that's quite frequently used and goes on into Totnes, is actually on the roundabout. And to this day, I mean, years it has been promised that every time there's development, they will make a safe access to a bus stop that has no direct pedestrian access. This is why it's so important to make it safe. So that's why I'm asking for a crossing of 384 to the stop.
Mr. Jackson, if you'd like to pick up some of those points, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Hello, my name is Richard Jackson. I work for Devon County Council, Highways Authority. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up the point, first of all, for the bus stop crossing, because that was fresh in my mind. We would assess the need for a crossing utilising a method called PV squared, which is the nationally recognised method of assessing pedestrian demands for crossing the road against vehicle flows on the main roads. I'm categoric that the flows of pedestrians that would be required to access a bus stop would not meet the criteria in terms of flows for pedestrian numbers in that equation. And the national guidance is quite simple. It does say if you install a informal crossing and it is underutilised, you actually induce a further road safety issue that drivers tend to ignore the facility because it's 99% of the time not used. And then when somebody does come to cross the road, you can actually cause more accidents than not by not having a formal crossing in the first place. So that's the evidence nationally on the matter. So the Highway Authority has stuck to that national recommendation, and hence why there is no crossing proposed in that location. Moving south to the A385 and the crossing which is in front of us on the screen here. The simple answer in terms of whether a refuse island can be accommodated is the highway extents in that location are simply not wide enough to accommodate an island feature without causing a safety issue. There are also hedges on both sides, I think on the northern side certainly of the road in that location, which would need to be removed. And well, to me, that is part of the character of Dartington, having those hedges in place. And I'm not aware the applicant owns the land in any case to facilitate the removal of that hedge because it's not within their control to do so. So I'm not aware that the vehicle speeds at that point exceed 35 miles per hour, 85th percentile. In fact, I go as far as to say they're much less than that at that point. Yes, there are drivers that do speed, but the purpose of having an 85th percentile, which is just above the average speed, is to take account of all motorists, not just the selected few that decide not to drive in a responsible way. Those drivers are expected to be monitored and enforced by the police. So in terms of whether there can be accommodated a refuse island, I don't think it's needed or it can fit.
It's actually a refuge island, not a refuse island.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Have you got any more questions, Councillor Hodgson?
No, but I must say, I don't think my questions have really been answered in terms of real safety. Well, because I remember when this came up before, I questioned it 3 years ago at Devon County Council, as obviously I'm the county councillor as well for this area. And one of the officers then, who's since left, unfortunately, Mike Jones, he said that the speeds on the A385 had not been assessed in terms of being within a built area. They'd been assessed on just being a 30-mile-an-hour area, and he felt that actually there should be assessments done for that particular area for the zebra crossing. So I just put that on the table as well.
Okay, yeah, no. Well, that can certainly come up during the debate. I mean, members, will hear your representation. They've heard what Mr. Jackson has to say, and they will draw their own conclusions on that.
Should I just touch on the need for the justification for a bus stop amendment at the roundabout, or not? You were asking about whether you had concerns about the existing bus stop located at the roundabout where the A384 intercepts the A385.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. So our view is on that, that the site has a bus stop on the A384 closer, just north of the site. So any bus going to and from Buckfastleigh, there is a choice for users to get off there for the site. And as we know, with Section 106 legislation, you're supposed to be mitigating the impact of the development, and it would not be legally possible for me to object to the application on grounds that the developer would have to amend that layout because of that reason. There's also a bus stop on the A385 with a shelter just opposite the post office.
Yeah, but the buses go to a different place, Richard. You know that. We've had this conversation before. Those are the buses. The point is,
the people from this development site have a choice where they can get on the bus, and that's the key point here, isn't it? So, would I be able to object to an application and say that doesn't matter, that point doesn't matter, we want to improve the roundabout anyway? I suspect if an inspector looked at that appeal, he would tell me that doesn't meet the tests of 106.
Well, all I could say is that the buses that come through from where that red cursor is coming through from Buckfastleigh are not the same buses that come through up the A385 from Plymouth. And that's why there's two different lots of bus stops. There's three different bus stops actually at the junction of Shinner's Bridge, which is where the two roads intersect. And I think if we want people to get out of their cars and use buses, we have to make safe access routes. And that's why pedestrian crossings are so important, and not to just make way constantly for cars, because that means more cars and more lorries. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to other questions. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. So on page 10 of your report, Mr. Kitching, it's listed that there's a proposal for 1 and 2 bedroom units to take up 22 to 26% of the allocation of affordable homes. In fact, Baker Estates sent me, I assume they sent everyone, a glossy brochure where they're saying to the public that 80% will be 1 and 2 bedroom homes, 15% 3 bedroom, and 5% 4 bedroom subject to agreement. And so I would like this not to be stated in your report that there is a lower provision of 1 and 2 bedroom homes, but to go along with Baker Estates' offer, publicly made, and that this would be incorporated into your report. I have a second issue, and that is that I haven't got the source for this, but I'm pretty sure more experienced members can help me perhaps, that the district council recommends that orientation of buildings is to the south to allow roofs to support solar panels and electricity generation to the optimal extent. Now, there is no detailed plan yet, but this is the stage to make this point to the developers, that within their plan, they should orient their buildings so that the roofs are facing south. If we lose this opportunity, we're behind the game. They'll have done all of the architectural work, all of the design around the roads, and we'll have missed this opportunity. And so I would like this to be a recommendation. And is that possible? Thank you.
Yes. Right. So the first question about the housing mix. So in my report, I refer to the open market housing mix. So in my report, where I talk about the fixing the open market housing mix, that's the 22 to 26% of open market being 1 and 2 bed units. In the so that's not the total number of housing, just the open market, not including the affordable. So in the I think there's a pack which has been sent to members on behalf of Baker Estates. It talks about the affordable housing, of which, so on this case, that would be 24 units, 30% of 80% of 80 units would be 24, of which 80% of those 24 units would be the 1 and 2 bed units. So the information you're reading in your report or pack from Baker Estates, that's talking about the affordable housing mix. So only talking about those 24 units. In my report, when I refer to the open market housing mix, it relates to the open market units. So the ones which are are not part of that 30%. So that's why you have a difference. I mean, I've done the maths anyway. So, for instance, if you put together both the open market and affordable, we'd be looking at sort of 38 to 43% of the total number of houses on site being 1 and 2 bed units. So that's why there's a differential. We would secure the right amount of affordable. We can secure the amount of affordable housing and the mechanism to agree that mix as well. I think it's one of those. It's just we're talking on slightly different purposes. In one the Baker Estates documents affordable, whereas mine's the open market. But in combination, we secure all of that. And regarding the second point about south-facing dwellings, yes, fully agree with that. And I'm just going to refer you to condition. So I think it's condition 16, requiring. So condition 16 requiring the reserve matters to include the scheme to demonstrate how the requirements of DEV 32 low carbon development will be delivered. And I've put in a special bit in the middle of that condition.
Can you give me a page, please, Mr. Kitchen?
So it's on page 32 of my report, but I don't have the same page. I'm not sure whether I have the same page numbering as members who access reports. So it's condition 16 at the end of the report, but before the habitats regulations assessment.
Yeah.
So condition 16 in the middle. I've put this an additional requirement about those details shall include, but not limited to, a solar master plan to show how access to natural light's been optimised. So that was the purpose of that, in terms of requiring them to look at the south-facing dwellings. Because I think it was the reason for the south-facing was about maximising access to natural light. But yes, it's been picked up, and we're telling them at this stage, as part of the condition, that they should do it as part of the reserve matters. So I think I've got that covered as part of the condition.
Okay. It doesn't say it explicitly, of course. You're inferring it. Are you sure that we'll be able to come back and enforce that later if it and require a change of design based upon what you've said?
Yes, I'm satisfied. I mean, we're fortunate in terms of the way the site is laid out. If the way the site is, sort of longer, is laid out. That so yes, the dwellings would be generally south-facing, and we can secure that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. without prolonging this any more than we already have, Councillor Hodgson, and I can quite understand it's in her ward and she has great concerns, and I have every sympathy with her. She brought up the fact that there's been another biodiversity thing done. All I really want to know the answer is, does our officer consider that the biodiversity thing that the applicant, Baker Estates, has put in is adequate and sound enough for us to continue on that?
Yes, so it's
a yes or no, basically. I mean, because we've been here before on other sites, and we get bogged down with experts, and you all know my thoughts on experts. You can have two experts on the same subject and come up with completely different answers. We have to make a judgment. This is a site that is on our forward plan for housing, and we have to do the best job we can to put in houses on there. And all I really want to know is if he's satisfied that the biodiversity plan that's been put forward mitigates the problems. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
So yes, I am, and that's following the consultation responses I've had back from Natural England and the Devon County Council ecologist as well. So based on their advice, yes, I am happy that it does what it needs to do.
Thank you.
Right, are there any more questions? Councillor Kemp, you had your hand up. You've already asked a question. I don't know if you wanted to come back very, very briefly.
No, because my question actually got answered, so it's fine during Councillor Hodgson's.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kemp. Mr. Kitchen, one question from me, if I may. First of all, just a clarification. I did say earlier on that the woodland management scheme would be part of the reserve matters. It's actually part of the 106 that needs to be agreed. So I'm sorry if I misled members there, but that will be part of the 106. I think also what Councillor Kemp is concerned about is that the area outside of the development boundary, where we're expecting the open space, the 20 metres to the north and the 10 metres to the south, it's how and who is going to manage that, and will that be part of the reserve matters, or again is that part of the 106?
Yes. So on the basis that it's outside the red line, so it's not a reserve matter. I need to secure it through 106. So again, secure the mechanisms at this stage to ensure that buffer is provided and maintained, managed in the long term. So it would be the 106 which secures it, but I do think that is likely to happen alongside the reserve matters, because if you're doing a biodiversity net gain, you need to know what you're losing elsewhere on the site to be able to come up with the mitigation required. So I think it will happen alongside the reserve matters, but it would be the 106 which secures the long-term the delivery, the provision of it, and the long-term management of it and beyond.
Okay, I mean, I just say by way of warning here that what I don't think members will be happy with, and I certainly wouldn't delegate approval if that's the way the committee goes, is that if it is somehow left to the developers to manage that in perpetuity, because that doesn't happen. So whatever the mechanism is, it needs to be something that is sustainable in the long term, not just in the hello, gone tomorrow, here today, gone tomorrow aspects of it. So Councillor Kemp, did you want to come back quickly?
Yeah, no, thanks for pointing that out, Julian. I just also am concerned about how close to the road the entrance actually will be, because as you know, on my estate where I live, it is very close to the road, and we've had nothing but problems with people crossing the road and getting into trouble with traffic flying through, and also the emissions, you know, being that close to the road. So I think the whole of that red line, apart from the widest bit, needs to come in. So maybe 60 houses, not 80.
Okay, right. That's your opinion. We'll move on to the speakers now, if we may. I don't think there are any more questions. Right. So the speakers I have, first of all, I understand I've got Hilary Wyatt. Unfortunately, Miss Wyatt can't be with us for personal reasons, and can I just say on behalf of the committee and officers that you know, in the personal circumstances, we wish you well, and hope that all can be resolved. Well, not resolved, but it passes. Right. Can I think Miss Young, you're going to read out Miss Wyatt's statement, if please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Hilary Wyatt. I'm a former Conservation and Design Officer and currently an EPSRC-funded PhD researcher in the historic build environment. I hold postgraduate degrees in surveying and sustainable building conservation. I'm also a Dartington Parish Councillor. Broome Park Field is a conspicuous and elevated slope to the north of the parish, where the historic pattern of isolated farmsteads, hamlets and small fields is especially well preserved. The red line developable area proposed adjoins the late medieval hamlet of Week to the west and Broome Park, a non-designated heritage asset, to the north. The eastern side boundary falls within the setting of a Grade 2 star listed church and adjoins the A384. The A384 Approach, which follows the Dart Valley south from the A38, is a key gateway to the South Hams and retains its rural character almost to the outskirts of Totnes. In deciding this application, the Council must have special regard to the preservation of a listed building, its setting, and any features of special architectural or historical interest. However, the level of detail in the application is not sufficient to decide the application. In his consultation response, the District Council's own Conservation Officer states that he has had to make a number of assumptions. Nevertheless, he goes on to agree with the applicant's conclusion that this application will result in minor or less than substantial harm. As a former Conservation Officer, I do not believe it is possible to assess harm on the basis of this application as it stands. I would like to draw Councillors' attention to 3 specific issues regarding heritage and landscape character. The first is the impact of the development on Week. Historically, Week was the principal estate hamlet, and in its well-preserved setting would clearly meet the statutory criteria for designation as a conservation area. However, the applicants have simply assessed whether the site is visible from selected individual properties and vice versa. The impact of the development on the wider heritage setting of Week is not considered. This could be resolved by moving the red line further east, as was originally proposed in the 2020 community consultation, and increasing the density of development. This would also prevent the development from enclosing Broome Park as proposed. The second concern is the limited assessment of St Mary's Church listed at Grade 2 star. This church was expensively relocated by J.L. Pearson and rebuilt on a grand scale. It is one of 3 churches built by the Champenoun and Froude families, who were notable religious reformists connected with the Oxford movement. The isolated rural setting is a deliberate aspect of the Gothic revival design. This is an important historical association which resulted in Dartington having 2 19th century churches built by a nationally significant architect. In this respect, Dartington is unique in the South Hams. None of this information is articulated in the applicant's submission, nor referred to by the Council's Conservation Officer. Unusually, Historic England have also declined to offer any advice on this application, despite the potential for harm to the setting of a Grade 2 star-listed building. Again, these concerns could be resolved by significantly setting back the red line developable area from the road with appropriate natural landscaping. My third concern is access from the A384 and internally. The audit response for the Stage 1 road safety audit states that the development frontage being introduced should change the feel of the road somewhat at this point, which should help reduce speeds. This confirms my concerns regarding the potential urbanisation of this stretch of road, which is directly within the rural setting of Dartington's Grade 2 Star Church. This would not be offset by the 15-metre deep verge and rows of trees now shown on the perimeter plan. The internal angular road layout and low-medium site density indicates that the development will be dispersed over the site in a way which is completely contrary to the established pattern of irregular and informal clustered settlements. Because of the site's elevation, the hard urban edges of this layout, together with the unusual perimeter strip, will appear as visually intrusive features which will detract from the quality of the local landscape, especially in skyline views. Many of these points have been made by South Ham District Council's landscape specialist, Amanda Urmson. However, there is little within the revised plans to indicate her comments have been taken on board. My opinion is that more detailed information needs to be submitted regarding access and the provisions of TTV 24 before this application can be approved. And that's the end of Ms. Wyatt's presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Obviously, we can't ask questions of Ms. Wyatt, so we will move on to the next speaker. That is Mr. Hutton, please.
Hello, Chair. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Graham Hutton, Development Director at Baker Estates, and we own the allocated land at Home Park. I appreciate that this application has proven controversial, and I thought, therefore, that it might be helpful to reflect on the planning system through which you are to make the decision today, this being a plan-led, evidence-based system. Taking the plan-led part first, it is clear that this site is allocated in your local plan and part of the delivery strategy, that allocation having been tested rigorously by the local plan inspector. The JLP was adopted in full cognizance of the emerging climate emergency, and South Hams have subsequently published detailed guidance in the form of an SPD on how policy should be applied in the context of both the climate emergency and adopted policy. So, in other words, the approval of new housing development and the climate emergency are not mutually exclusive, and the conditions proposed by your officer demonstrate how any new housing will be required to meet your policy guidance in this regard. Of course, the local plan has many other policies, and I'm delighted that we have again been able to propose a fully policy compliant development, particularly with regard to affordable housing, where officers have been very clear on the need, and indeed on the need for open market homes. So your officer's report confirms that the application is policy compliant and therefore in compliance with the plan. If we consider the evidence-based part of the system, it is fair to say that the burden of proof sits with us as applicant to demonstrate to your officers and their specialist expert consultees that the development proposals are compliant. This we have achieved in all respects, be it heritage, air quality, ecology, transport, flooding or highways, etc. Our level of investigation and survey work has been considered robust by the experts, and have been agreed. That wasn't my dog. Please be in no doubt, this is an incredibly high hurdle to have cleared. It is easy in this forum for unsubstantiated and unevidenced claims to be made, and we've heard some already, which seek to question.
Sorry, Chair, could you ask Mr. Hutton to go back over that last point when we were interrupted, because I lost my train of thought at that point.
Of course, I'm happy to do that. If I just quickly move back to the previous paragraph, I was talking about evidence and that our level of investigation and survey work has been considered robust by all the experts, and those conclusions drawn from it agreed. And please be in no doubt, this is an extremely high hurdle to have cleared. It's easy in this forum for unsubstantiated, unevidenced claims to be made, and we have heard some, which seek to question the evidence base, and such unevidenced claims should not carry weight and have been discarded by your expert consultees because they are incorrect. Dartington is a thriving, very aware community in which great care is taken regarding new development, particularly with regard to ecology. And in this regard, I can assure you that there is no higher or harder test than satisfying Natural England. Our expert ecologists have undertaken the extensive survey work required, and Natural England have confirmed that the mitigation we propose can and should allow development to proceed because we pass all the tests of the Habitats Regulation Assessment process. For this site, this particularly means that the greater horseshoe bats will be protected and a net gain in biodiversity will be achieved. Our proposals, therefore, have been led by the plan and are fully evidence-based with a policy compliant Section 106 package. However, I think it is also important to remember what is not before you for approval today. As you know, outline approval is not a license to commence construction. It is simply approval of the bookends of the development. It defines the parameters from which we can begin to develop detailed proposals with the conditions in place so the development will comply with your policies. If approved today, we will continue our endeavours to engage with the community and stakeholders as we begin to develop detailed designs for the homes and the outside spaces which are so important to the occupants of both the human variety and the protected species, of course. Therefore, I urge you to support the principle of this development by voting to approve our outline application today, because it accords with the joint local plan and is rooted in evidence which has been approved by your experts. So to do so would simply be to implement your own policies. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hutton. Members, any questions for Mr. Hutton? I can't see. Oh, Councillor Hodgson.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mr. Hutton about the consultation. In the brochure that he sent out, he refers to having engaged Totnes Town Council.
Correct.
Could he just explain what that was? Because I'm actually a Deputy Mayor of Totnes Town Council and also on their planning committee. So just if he could explain what that means, because it suggests that there's been proper consultation. I have to say I've been very concerned about the level of consultation. I think just making contact with 90 people living in immediate proximity to the site and offering them one-to-one, I don't think is really what you call community consultation, because many people would be quite intimidated by that, whereas they prefer to actually be met as a group, and with Zoom that could have been organised.
Okay, thank you for the question. Obviously our applications have been accompanied with a statement of community involvement, which sets out in it in detail all of the consultation work which has gone on. It certainly wasn't limited to one-to-one meetings. It's been nearly a year now that we've been involved in various conversations, including meetings with representatives of Totnes Town Council. We've written to the council. They declined initially to meet specifically, but we met with members, particularly on the topic of air quality management. So the SCI sets it all out. Your officers, of course, can explain in more detail, but it has been an extensive consultation. Nor is it single stage, Councillor Hodgson, because quite rightly, the community, I think, would have been displeased if we'd have consulted with too much information, because it's important to understand what people's wishes are before moving to reserve matter stage. Whereupon, should this be approved, we will engage once again and talk about the detail as things are worked up. I hope that answers.
Can I ask a further question, please, Chairman?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, just regarding the slide that's actually sitting there before us at this very minute, looking at the attenuation pond, and obviously that's come up already, not only for myself, but other members of the committee, in terms of asking the case officer. The location of the attenuation pond is a matter of concern if it means taking out trees. Can that be moved further north?
Well, the design of the sustainable drainage system for the site needs to be central to the development of the layout, and they need to come hand in glove as the application is worked up for reserve matter stage. As the officer explained to you, the trees in that area are young, poorly managed, and in many cases sort of self-seeded. It's an unmanaged section of woodland. Obviously, water drains downhill, so the sustainable drainage features will predominantly follow the topography and move towards the lower part of the site. So there are a number of detailed matters in that area, ecological, as well as residential design and drainage, all of which are reserve matters and would need to be worked up together to come with the best outcome. So as your officer said to you, is it possible to drain the site within the confines? Yes, it absolutely is, in accordance with the requirements from the Devon County flood drainage team, and I wouldn't want to prejudge what the final outcome will be, but it will be worked up hand in glove so that the drainage is central to the design of the layout.
Okay, can I just come back once on this very briefly, Chairman? Sorry. Sorry, I mean, you refer to our officer. It's actually, no, it's our officer, isn't it? Ours, because there's a planning performance agreement in place that you fund. So let's be clear on that. In terms of the attenuation pond, trees.
Sorry, Councillor. I said your officer.
Yes, I know, but I'm saying it's actually our officer, yours as well, because there's a planning performance agreement in place with Baker's Estates.
There is a planning performance agreement, and I hope, and I'd be very happy for officers to clarify the basis of that. But the officer is employed.
Can I just stop you there? We've gone through that. We've gone through it at council. That matter has been discussed and debated. I don't want to reopen it here.
Okay, I'm not wishing to. I just wanted to make it clear for any of the members of the public listening as well, because obviously it's really important that this is publicly understood. But it's just really about that attenuation site. What you're not giving me, Mr. Hutton, is an understanding as whether or not you'd be willing to move that attenuation pond slightly north if those trees were to be valued as they stand, rather than remove them.
Councillor Hodgson, I think Mr. Hutton's made it clear that will be part of the reserve matters application. So I don't want to get, the whole drainage scheme will be part of the reserve matters scheme. We know that we've had problems with that before, and as a result, drainage will be part of the reserve matters. Where that attenuation pond is and what it does will come up in reserve matters. So what we are speculating now as to where that attenuation pond might be. I think it's fair to say Mr. Hutton has said that at the moment they're looking at where it is. We may, as committee members, feel that that's not acceptable, but that will come at reserve matters, and it's not to be debated now.
Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I just wondered, Mr. Hutton, if it would be possible to I have a lack of knowledge on this, obviously, but as I understand it, the drainage needs to be sorted before the actual estate is designed, so the estate should be designed around it. So can it not be a part of a recreational facility as well as a biodiverse area, and obviously having the function as a sustainable drainage ditch as well? What are they called? SUDs, aren't they? Sustainable.
Yeah. Sustainable drainage systems. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Yeah. So it's really important that the drainage design and the layout come hand in glove with one another, Councillor Kemp.
Yes.
And also really important that the green spaces on the site serve useful purposes, and that members of the public and occupants have appropriate access to areas. Those are all matters of landscaping. Matters of reserve matter. Yeah, landscaping, layout, massing, all the rest of it. So, I guess what I'm saying is I agree that it's critical that the drainage comes forward with the layout, and the officer explained earlier how there's a planning condition that requires that it must. It was Councillor Pannell, I think, that expressed earlier concern to make sure that the drainage system does indeed come back to this committee, which it will with the reserve matters layout. So the condition, which I think I might recall correctly, is condition 16 or 18, one or the other of the proposed approval, requires that above ground drainage solutions are prioritised where possible, so that we drain as far up the SUDS hierarchy as we can. And as the Chair just mentioned a moment ago, those are reserve matters. So I think I agree with you so far as its importance, but it will come back to this committee.
Okie dokie, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I think Mrs. Foles would just like to make a point on the your whose officer it is, just so it's on the record for this. Mrs. Foles.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to say to clarify that Mr. Kitchen is the council's officer. He's employed directly with a contract with the council, and his duty is to the council and you as members to make his recommendation, and not to Baker Estates. So he's got his professional duties, and they are to you as members to make a professional and reasonable judgment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right, any more questions? Can't see any. There's a couple of hands up, but I think they may be historical. So I will.
One of them's mine, Chairman. If I could just.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Holway. Yes, no.
Just very briefly, if I could ask Mr. Hutton if, when they are getting the details up for this development, they would consider rainwater harvesting in the houses, because we are facing a problem with drinking water in this country and climate change, and it may also help reduce flash flooding. So I don't want a clear answer, but at least it would be good if they will consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holway. The planning condition requiring us to evidence how we've complied with policy Dev 32 would cover that as a topic. I think there are 8 subsections to Dev 32 around climate resilience, energy performance, and a number of matters. And climate resilience certainly covers matters of flooding and the rest of it. So all of that will be wrapped up in how we address that planning condition prior to coming back at reserve matters stage.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hutton. Any more questions? No, in which case, thank you, sir. And we will move on to the next speaker, which is the Parish Council representative. That is Councillor Turrell. Councillor Turrell, please.
Good morning, councillors. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
Yes, okay. Right, Dartington Parish Council has submitted comprehensive objections linked to national policy and law, which all councillors have had a chance to read, and I hope you have. Our objections focus around missing information, access impact, the provisions of T2B 24 and Section 106 contributions. The Parish Council does not consider that the information provided by re-advertisement of the application is adequate, and so has not changed its view from a strong objection. The application does not seem to understand nor appreciate the character, significance and effect of this suburban style development upon the heritage of this rural area of Dartington. It does not learn from the positioning, setting and character of the medieval hamlet of adjacent Week, nor respects the setting of the Grade 2 listed St Mary's Church. The Section 106 suggests yet more provision for recreation. It's already well provided for in Dartington, but it omits the needs of older people. We have quite a few. I'm going to focus on ecology. Natural England and the LPA ecologist had numerous concerns about the impacts of the development upon greater horseshoe bats and other wildlife. Both Broom Park and Sawmills West are in the sustenance zone of the SAC. The bats, their roosts, the foraging areas, the flyways, they're all legally protected through SSSI's Wildlife and Countryside Act and the Habitats Regs. The GH bat colonies from nearby Buckfastleigh and Balcomore are the largest left in Europe, but they only total 2,600 bats. They depend upon Dartington to feed, roost and fly through and have complex habitat requirements. When we know the number of a species, we know it's on the brink. Despite this baseline surveys of the species and the habitat are not provided. Flyways are not mapped, pinch points not noted, nor transitory roosts. There is no quantitative data on which to base the developers' assumptions that the impacts are acceptable. Renowned ecologist John Day reported to our recent PC meeting that his survey of the proposed attenuation basin off Droridge Lane casts questions over the reliability of EAD's conclusions there, and consequently upon this site too. Our PC has already raised concerns regarding assumptions by EAD Ecology, such as the bat passes being probably juvenile males, not lactating females. There's absolutely no way of telling. They did not look for a roost nearby that the LPA ecologist suggested was likely. Paras 43 and 44 of the MPPF rightly underline the need for adequate information for decision makers. In the case of such a highly protected species, we need quantifiable conclusions based on fact. Broom Park and its impact upon GH bats cannot be seen alone. With adjacent Sawmills West being developed at the same time, and with so many recent greenfield developments in the SAC, I'm talking about Yarner Mill, Brimhay, Beacon Park Industrial Estate, and all the attendant highway lighting we've seen in recent years, the effect is cumulative. The JLP demands SHDC consider such in-combination effects. Just 7 days ago, the much requested Habitats Regulations Assessment was provided based on EAD's reports, but it's well after the consultation period for the public, and we as a PC have not met to have a view. I personally understand that it looks at the cumulative effects of the 3 Baker DHT developments and proposed Wave Academy, but leaves out many large developments approved within the JLP and several exception sites close by, the BMX track, school extensions, the all-ability trackways. Natural England demanded that SHDC protect bats in perpetuity. The Parish Council strongly doubts that this can be achieved through planning conditions at a reserved matters stage. Conditions are rarely enforced due to lack of resources, and after the properties are sold, it's almost impossible to control lighting, the management of hedgerows, the woodlands, as one councillor has been asking about, and open space. There's nothing left to control it in perpetuity. With extinctions at 100 times base level, it's commendable that SHDC have declared a climate and ecological emergency, yet this developer makes no reference to it nor acts accordingly. And that is my submission.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turrell. Members, any questions for Councillor Turrell? Councillor Hodgson. Sorry, Councillor Hodgson, you're on mute there. We haven't heard any of that.
We all need to lip read, don't we? Sorry. Yes, can I ask you? Thank you, Councillor Turrell. That was very useful and very helpful. It gives a very clear picture of the status of the wildlife. Could you just comment really on how you see John Day's report fitting into this, and as to what we're trying to understand and comment and make a decision on today?
Yes, I mean, Mr. Day, I think, is speaking later, but the point is about this, that he discovered in March, for example, on the Attenuation Basin, 75 species where EAD has put 30 in. The whole point about bats is actually they're the canaries down our mine, to put it basically. If the habitat is right for bats, then it's going to be right for an awful lot else. Insect, plants, we hear lots about the decimation of insects. So, you know, if we haven't got a habitat that's fit for bats, we haven't got it fit for anything else. And I think this is what John Day is bringing out. It's that sheer level of biodiversity that seems to have been missed. My real concern here is the conclusions, the conjecture that's been made without science.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, any other questions for Councillor Turrell? No, I can't see any. Thank you very much for your presentation. Excellent. Right. Yeah, I just because I think that the Councillor Turrell has mentioned a lot about the ecology, moved on to the ecology a bit. Perhaps it might be worth asking our Miss Jennings, the county ecologist, to make a few observations with this application. If she's there, that would be good. Miss Jennings.
Hi. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Yes.
Do you want me to respond particularly to the Greater Horseshoe Bats and Mr. Day's report?
I think that would be useful at this stage, just so that members, you know, from another point of view, really, in respect of the ecology and the biodiversity of the site. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and keep it really brief. So in terms of Greater Horseshoe Bats, then obviously we have got population of European importance here, so it's critical that we deal with this properly. But EAD have done sufficient survey in terms of the greater horseshoe bats and other bat species. We have worked very closely with Natural England to do the habitat regulations assessment. That is on the edge of the sustenance zone at the moment, but it's a hibernation sustenance zone. We are actually discussing this with Professor Fiona Matthews, who we work very closely with. He's a national greater horseshoe bat expert. And as has always been said, it's very likely that we're going to make the sustenance zone 2 kilometres rather than 4 kilometres. So any impact in terms of sustenance zone foraging has been ruled out by Natural England and ourselves all along in this. So what we're talking about is connectivity for greater horseshoe bats, and that's why we've all worked together to come up with these dark corridors through the sites to ensure that bats will be able to continue to use the site. And we have other routes have been looked at, so the other routes around this area have also been mapped to ensure that that connectivity can be maintained. So we're comfortable that it is all right in terms of greater horseshoe bats and all legal requirements have been met. But I can answer any other questions on that. In terms of the botanical survey, then I'm very aware of Mr. Day's report and welcome that. But also the EAD survey has been sufficient for the attenuation basin, which I like to say we're not looking at this morning, in terms of us knowing that it is very close to meeting priority habitat status. We're not clear as to whether it does or not yet. There's obviously a professional expert different view on this. But the EAD survey is absolutely sufficient for myself and Natural England who have raised concerns about that particular site. So it does list species such as pignut, corky fruity water dropwort, which are characteristic of nice grasslands. So we have raised concerns. I'm also aware that the EAD botanist who did that survey is what's called FISC level 4, which means that they are competent nationally to carry out botanical surveys. And we haven't looked at that application further because it's not being discussed this morning. But in terms of these particular sites, again, we consider that the EAD survey is sufficient. So in terms of sawmills, the list submitted is totally different to the list for the attenuation basin. It's absolutely not characteristic of a priority habitat. But we have asked the developer to try and protect that sward through the dark corridors on that site. So there is some botanical interest there. There is a species in Perfora at St John's Wort, which I'm sure Mr. Day will mention, which is rare in a Devon context, but it isn't rare nationally at all. It's not a priority species, it's widespread nationally, and it's not on the Devon priority species list either. So we're comfortable that sufficient survey has been done in order for us to determine this application. Is that
that
all right?
Thank you, Ms. Jennings. No, that was very good. I just wonder if you might, I mean, just as you're there, we can see on the plan that there are 20 metres and 10-metre buffer zones around it. In your experience, what sort of effect would that have on biodiversity, on what it is at the moment, and what we might expect with those buffer zones?
Okay, so the buffer zones have largely been put in with respect to greater horseshoe bats to ensure that we've got dark corridors of below 0.5 lux. So that's the idea. And obviously, the developer has committed to achieving 10% biodiversity net gain on this site. So they have produced a metric. And so the whole thing at the moment looks like it will add up to 10%. But again, the details of that need to be looked at again when reserve matters come in. And so that's where we can ensure that these buffers benefit greater horseshoe bats, but also wildlife generally. I'd just like to say that greater horseshoe bats don't actually require species-rich grassland necessarily, but obviously the buffers will be managed for wildlife, but also for recreational interest as well, I'm aware, and so that balance just needs to be looked at reserve matters stage. So also I'd like to say, hedges will be managed appropriately, and there's obviously, no requirement at the moment for the landowner to manage this site for biodiversity. So at the end of the day, this site could in fact be better if this is done properly, which it should be for wildlife, than being an improved grassland field with flailed hedges.
That's great. Thank you very much. I don't know if any other members have got questions that they'd like to ask Ms. Jennings at this stage. No, I can't see any, in which case we will move to the local ward member, Councillor Hodgson. Can I say to Councillor Hodgson at this stage, if you just make your sorry, yes, first of all, thank you very much, Ms. Jennings. Councillor Hodgson, at this stage, if you just make your, you know, this is a your representation as the local ward member rather than the debate itself. If you want to propose things later, then we'll move into the debate and then you can propose as you see fit or wait. But this is you as the local ward member, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I start, can I just ask one question? Where is the document that you've referred to about the list of speakers? Because I haven't been emailed anything, and there's nothing on what I can see of the mod.gov website that's available to me. So where is that list of speakers? Because you've referred to Mr. Day going to speak, but I can't see any list anywhere to help me understand when that will be.
Oh, okay. Apologies about that. I don't know if Miss Young could forward the list of speakers to Councillor Hodgson.
When was it sent out? When was it sent out? Because I haven't got it.
Do we know?
Yes, it was sent out yesterday and this morning. As with every other DM committee I've done so far, I only sent it to the chair and the vice chair. I'm sorry, I didn't realise that it was supposed to go to the whole committee.
Okay.
Yes, I've never had it in the past, and I just kept wondering why I wasn't getting it, because surely we always get it at committee.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. In the past, what we've had is we've had printed sheets when we come into the committee meeting in the chamber. So obviously that's changed with the Zoom. It's an oversight on our part. Apologies about that. If Miss Young could forward it on to all members, that would be good. But yes, Mr. Day is speaking on the second application. He's the first speaker on the second application. But anyway, Councillor Hodgson, over to you.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Okay, so just to make some key points really about as the representative for the ward, and it is challenging because obviously Dartington has been awarded, if that's the right word, a very high percentage of the housing proposed under the joint local plan. And as members will be aware, I've looked at not only the individual sites, but also the cumulative impact. And that's what I really urge everybody to bear in mind when they're thinking about this application and the next one today, because it is really relevant. And that's why I've been very concerned about the lack of what I would say adequate public consultation. I really understand with the difficulties of COVID, of course I do, but I do think that could have been done in a somewhat different way that could have actually meant more people could have had an opportunity for input. That said, I do think that there are some serious issues that we need to think about at this point, and these are issues that have been raised by councillors that you've heard a statement from today, and also Councillor Tara, who spoke herself, and also the parish council has objected thoroughly all the way through this. They indeed actually hosted a public consultation themselves. They hosted an emergency meeting, and I thought they did it very well. And I'm aware that Bakers were present. Mr. Hutton was there, and also Mr. Edwards was there as well from Bakers. So they have heard very clearly what the concerns are. And that's why I think it's disappointing that really we're still at the position of the starting blocks rather than maybe them taking on board what has come up. Now, the heritage is a very clear one, and you've seen our photographs today. And the proximity of the Grade 2 listed church at Dartington, the proximity of a rural road, which is the current approach road that goes on the A384, that goes past up towards the junction of Shinners Bridge, which many of you I'm sure are aware of the old shops that are there, the shops at Dartington as they're called, which is the old cider press centre, and very much a lovely feature. And you know, the setting of that is very important, as is the setting of Week. And the character area assessments are now being currently undertaken under the neighbourhood plan for Dartington, where they're looking at all these ancient hamlets. And Dartington is very much a place of hamlets, not a village centre, but that is very rapidly changing with the urbanisation being caused by these new developments. And that's what we can perhaps today think about. What's the impact of 80 houses going into this this site, as opposed to maybe whether and think about whether that can be accommodated adequately with the heritage impacts that have been set out for you. The flood risk is a really major one as well, and I think that's something we really need to bear in mind, because the thought of those shops at Shinners Bridge suddenly being really flooded could actually sort of like undermine them absolutely, literally. And I think that's something that we need to ensure that we're looking at the best way to actually manage flood risk, not just this, you know, pond at the end of the field, but actually something a lot more sort of informed. And this flood management is actually very similar to the way that they've tried to slow COVID down. You can't stop it, but you can slow it, and that's why the whole impact of trying to slow it through actually using when the runoff comes, whether it's coming off roofs or off of a field, you try and make sure you've got sort of significant trees in the way, because they actually take the water down those capillaries that they form, so it doesn't all rush down and really flood out the area. It slows it all down, and that's why I think another reason we need to think about whether we're overfilling this sloping site. Air quality management has been a really big issue for particularly the arterial route as it goes through Totnes, and we can't pretend that we can just look at what's happening in Dartington. If we're bringing more housing into Dartington and associated vehicles, and we don't make sure that it's really possible for people to want to be able to use the buses, etc., then we've got to bear in mind what's going to happen along that arterial road, and that could actually just extend. We've got air quality issues. No developments to date have actually made a difference to the air quality management action plan. There's a whole, I don't know if you've read it, but there's only 2 air quality management areas in the South Hams, and the one at Totnes has not been addressed. And I can't see that it's going to be addressed by this if we're refusing to put extra zebra crossings in that can slow the traffic down, can give a sense of a more residential area, a more occupied area, somewhere that we can't even get a 20-mile-an-hour zone going through there, which we should, and I will continue to press for that, and I have done in the past. So I think those are very serious issues. And as we've heard in terms of the habitats, I mean, what affects us also affects the animals, and in fact often they are, as Councillor Tyrrell said, the canaries in the mine, where in fact the loss of insects, the loss of grassland, the loss of open space, the loss of woodlands. And it seems that there's a suggestion here we should just even take out more trees just to put a flood zone in when we can actually do it differently. I think these are things that we need to really be concerned about. And I feel that we haven't got enough information to make a good judgment today. I think we need a built and natural heritage assessments that are independent to give us more information to really tell us what we're looking at today. So that's what I wanted to say in terms of what, as the representative of the ward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hodgson. I don't know if members have got any specific questions for Councillor Hodgson at this stage. And if not, we shall move into the debate. So members, it's now over to you. Who would like to speak on this application? Do I have any takers? Councillor Kemp, excellent. Off you go.
Hello, thank you. Well, I just really appreciated what Sarah Jennings had to say and her comments. I totally get what she's saying about the management and being better for the future, etc. And agree with that. But the thing is, who manages it? Who enforces it? And I'm sorry to say this, and I'm sure Mr. Hutton would be terribly offended, but developers quite often do not follow through on what they say at the beginning. And I know that because I'm sitting in one of the estates. So, you know, I know that. So how can we mitigate for that? Is that the right word?
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Kemp. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, we've got examples where it just hasn't worked. The woodland management plan, the whole way that we manage those buffer zones is something that will be controlled by the 106, and that it would be if members are minded to agree. No. Well, no. Listen to me. If members are reminded to agree this application, then it will be to a delegated decision to myself and Mr. Weimer. Personally, I'd also actually like to include the local ward member, Councillor Hodgson, in those deliberations. I think we should change the recommendation there slightly. Can I just say that I'm fully aware of those points that you raise about how the management doesn't work, and we will do everything we can to make sure that there is proper management in there, and it will be in there in perpetuity. But other than that, I don't know what we can say. Our experience is it doesn't work. I think our job is to make sure that we have a system in place that does work.
Right. Okay.
I think we'll just have to leave it there for the moment.
Okay.
Councillor, was there anything else you wanted to add, Councillor Kemp?
No, I did want to know, actually, when it comes to percentages, I've no idea of numbers, so I wanted to know how many of the properties were actually affordable housing, and actually what is the average cost of, say, a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom house to the purchaser?
Well, of the affordable element?
Yes. Yes, and can they have local restrictions on them?
Do we have a housing officer here who might be able to answer some of those questions? No. I mean, my understanding is with our allocation policy, we certainly do have some local restrictions. I think Dartington, it's only in our bigger towns that we don't have those local restrictions. I mean, maybe Councillor Hodgson, you could help here.
Sure, they should go. Local restrictions should apply to all affordable housing that is built, and also to follow on.
Yeah, no, okay, no, accept that, Councillor Kemp. But what I'm saying is that I think we have a policy that does apply for local housing, affordable housing for if it's. I don't know if Dartington is one of the town is big enough or small enough now so that the local qualifications apply.
It will be at this rate, won't it?
Councillor Hodgson, do you know the answer on that?
Well, it'll be bigger than Totnes soon. But if I would have thought the monitoring officer could actually inform that, because surely Becky Fowles is part of the people that signs the 106. If not, I think it should be in.
Okay, well, look, I think let's ask Mr. Kitchen. I think Mr. Kitchen might know. Mr. Kitchen, do you know?
Yes. So the affordable housing. The first question: what does it mean in numbers? So for 80 dwellings, 24 of those would be affordable housing units, of which 2/3 would be social rented units, and 1/3 would be an intermediate type rented, so affordable rent, shared ownership, or discount open market. They're to be allocated to designated persons who fall within the section and allocations criteria set out in the adopted local allocations policy in the first instance. And if that ceases to operate, then the Devon Home Choice criteria will apply. So, so it's with the local allocations policy.
So sorry, Brent. So 24 are affordable, and then how you say 2/3? So how many does that equate that are social housing?
Yeah, so
16.
Yeah, so 24 are affordable, of which 16 would be social rent.
Right.
Yeah, that's sort of traditional model social rented units.
Okay.
And then the other 8 being the intermediate style, which could be affordable rent, shared ownership, or discount open market.
Okay, so given the crisis that is occurring in the area of people not being able to find anywhere to live and having to move out of the area, and the influx of persons buying up all these properties as either retirement funds or second homes, etc., and then renting them out at an inflated price, how can we manage that? Can that be dealt with at committee?
Councillor Kemp, the 30% is what? There is 70% open market. We have no control over that whatsoever. But the 30% of the affordable, we do have control. My understanding is that there is a local allocation policy in place here, so those would just be for local people. That's within the South Hams. If they're not applied for, then that would move on to Devon Choice, which is obviously across the whole of Devon. But that's the situation. The 70% we have no control over at all. They're open market, and people can do as they wish with them.
Right, but once a property is sold on, Then,
no, the 30 are in perpetuity.
Right. Okay. Fine.
The 30 are in perpetuity unless obviously there is government legislation that changes that, which we've seen before in the right to buy. But yeah. But at the moment, it's 30, 70. 70 we don't control. 30 we do have a control at this stage.
Right. Well, I still think it's not enough. But anyway.
Fair enough. But that's the policy. That is our policy that we have in place. So it's policy compliant in that sense.
Okay. It needs to be fluid, though, doesn't it? That policy, because obviously things have changed massively because of COVID.
There will be a chance to review the joint local plan coming up in the next few years, and that's at that point you can argue the case to change it. But as it is, it's 30%. That's policy compliant. So, you know, we could not refuse this, saying that they haven't got enough affordable housing, because actually it hits the 30% and the definition of affordable.
Well, maybe Baker Estates could actually just increase that number based on being, you know, a socially conscious.
They might want to.
Organisation.
That's not before us today. So I'm going to move it on now. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. I would also like to make a general point that this looking at the potential sites around Dartington, it reminds me of the development that's happened in Ivybridge. We are asked to consider a single site, whereas in fact the roads and the medical provision and the schooling are all affected by so much building, and there's a structural hole in the way that this is approached, and I feel a depression at this repeat from what's happened in Ivybridge. I've stopped.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, just switching on my video. Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things. We're between a rock and a hard place, as usual. I do have sympathy with the residents around. I have sympathy with the ward member, to be honest, because there are several sites coming forward on her patch. The point being, though, unfortunately, they are on the joint local plan. And as I said before, the most important thing is that we make sure that we get the maximum amount of housing on there in the best possible way. As Councillor Kemp said, we're very short of housing for local people. It's unfortunate we can't have any more than 30% affordable, but that's the way it is. But I am a bit disappointed today. We've got sidelined too often. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, everything else bar the actual housing going on here, which is already in the plan. The drainage and everything, the biodiversity and all that's all going to come up in reserve matters. And luckily the flooding is in there after you, Councillor Brazil, and myself and my ward, where we've had flooding issues where we knew it wasn't going to work. And some of it's still ongoing, but we've got control of all that. And we just make sure, if we are minded to pass this today, that we do get everything joined together. Councillor Abbott is quite right as well, in as much that they are put on one by one. We know we have problems with air pollution in Ivybridge. We know we have problems with air pollution in Totnes. But we still have these sites for housing, which we're told we need, and we've got to do the best job we possibly can. And that's where we are. So as much as I want to say at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. Councillor Hodgson.
No, that's going to be me next.
Sorry, Councillor Rowe, I'll bring you in next. I wasn't quite sure when Councillor Hodgson's hand had gone up. Because she put her hand up rather than the comment box.
Sorry, I think I did slightly go ahead of Councillor Rowe.
Carry on.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to actually give my view now. Obviously, I've responded in terms of what, you know, my representation of the parish as the ward. I mean, it's my view that the proposals to date for this application remain unsound, and again, I suggest deferral for the applicants to come back with more information and better proposals that truly address the provisions of the joint local plan, which obviously we're looking at, and its protective measures that must be stringently applied to ensure minimum harm to the natural and built heritage of the ancient parish of Dartington. I believe it's not possible to deliver 80 new houses on this site, and that needs to be reconsidered, as given the concerns regarding potential harm that have been raised. Potential overdevelopment on this site needs to be curtailed, and deferral gives the developers the opportunity to go back to the drawing board and come up with a much more sustainable plan. Once the diggers arrive, there is no turning back, so we must ensure that any new sites deliver the best possible development. And if that means fewer new houses than since we determined the joint local plan, and subsequently also reflect the impact of the fact that South Hams District Council, the Parish Council in Dartington and our Parliament have declared climate and ecological emergencies since we determined the joint local plan. We need to recognise the need for compromises to many of our ambitious plans, and developing out plans in the joint local plan needs to be part of this. I call for deferral, and if it's not deferral, I would therefore actually, well, maybe we need to take a vote on that first, but if you don't accept that, then I will actually propose refusal on the basis of overdevelopment of the site.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Rowe.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I look at the very beginning, the introduction, where it says up to 80 dwellings. It doesn't say it will be 80 necessarily. So it says outline application, blah, 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 for up to 80 in number of residential units. So it doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be 80. So I think we perhaps got a bit hung up on that. However, this site is available for development in the JLP. Dartington has been identified as being in the smaller towns and key villages category, and where there are allocations altogether across that area for 911 new homes during the planned period for 200 from 2014 to 2034. Dartington has a good range of services and amenities, and is in easy reach of Totnes. The primary school and Kevex have the capacity to accommodate the additional children, and the site is allocated for development by policy TTV 24, providing up to 80 homes. All the statutory consultants, consultees and specialist advisors have had no objections. The only objections are Dartington Parish Council and a good number of residents within Dartington. I understand their concerns. I understand about the biodiversity, the bats, and particularly I am concerned about the drainage in the accentuation tank, which is at the moment being placed adjoining woodland. I would like to see if that could be moved, and all trees and the surrounding outside strips that are going to be left there, and the hedges aren't going to be interfered with, but they will have to be managed. So that would come under presumably an estate management plan, which would need to be put in there. But we're not debating all the bits that will go in there. We're just today debating whether we're going to have this site is going to be able to be developed on or not. And I think that's important. We will be, if we approve it today or we don't approve it, we can then go back. We will be looking at, in a future meeting, at the detailed permissions later on. So, Chairman, I'm going to move approval because I think we need to move this on, and it is in the JLP. So it is a designated site which has to be brought forward. So I move approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Any other members wishing to speak? Members, I have a proposal for a defer. Okay. Councillor Foss, I see you seconding. Are you seconding recommendation for approval?
Yes, I am, Chairman.
Okay, as per the officer recommendation. Okay, so I've had that proposed and seconded first, so I'll take that vote first. Obviously, if it is approved, then that will, everything else will fall, and the application will be approved. If it fails, then we have a proposal for a deferral, and then the other thing was, and if that fails, then we had a proposal for refusal. But so initially we will move on to just before we do take the vote, Mr. Kitchen, you know, we've heard during the debate concerns about the proposed attenuation pond. It's not actually part of this, but we just want to make sure that it isn't fixed by this application, so that when the drainage and the detail in the reserve matters comes forward, we may be able to move the position of it. So if you could do condition 4 on that, that would be good. The other thing I would like to change in the recommendation is that it's the head of planning, Mr. Weimer, myself as chairman of the planning committee, and also Councillor Hodgson as the local member, if it is approved, that the 106 is discussed with before it's delegated approval. So I'd like to change that if that's okay. Councillor Taylor, did you want to say something?
I'd just like to have a question. If this was refused, Chairman, how does that stand against the JLP? Because this was an allocated site, and we're going against the JLP.
You have to make your own judgment, Councillor Taylor. I mean, it is an allocated site. The applicant, Mr. Hutton, has made it clear that in his view that it is it sticks to all our planning policies as they are. If we are to refuse it, we've got to come up with reasons as to why we think it is outside of our planning policies. You know, and it's not for me to direct you as such. You know, you have to decide amongst yourselves whether where you feel that it's in, you know, it contradicts our planning policies. The allocated site is obviously a massive material consideration that we have to take into account when we're deciding these. But can I just leave it there? Or that just Mr. Kitchen, if you might come in, please, if that's okay, about condition 4, I think it is.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, about the attenuation pond shown on the parameter plan here. Condition 4 requires the development to be carried out in accordance with this parameter plan. But I think for the sake of clarity, following members' discussion about that, I think that condition probably just needs to be amended slightly to saying the application for reserve matters shall be in accordance with the submitted parameters plan, as shown in front of you now. Bar the exact positioning of the attenuation pond, just so we get to the point where we are not fixed or held to ransom with a fait accompli.
Okay.
So I'm happy to amend my recommendation to of condition 4 just to not quite fix that at this stage.
No, thank you for that. I think that would be welcomed. So the 2 minor amendments to the recommendations to this recommendation to the proposal as per the recommendations of the officer are on 4, that the attenuation pond is not fixed where it is, and we can, you know, and during reserve matters we can change it. And the other one is that the local ward member is added into the scheme of delegation for the 106. Can I ask Councillor Rowe and Councillor Foss if you're happy with those 2 amendments?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, right. In which case we'll move to the vote. Then this is proposal to accept the to approve the application as per the officer recommendations. And Ms Young, if you could take the vote now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please, can you confirm that you've heard all of the debate and let me know how you're voting? Councillor Abbott.
I have heard all the debate and I am voting for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
I've heard all of the debate and I'm voting for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
I have heard all the debate and I vote for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Foss.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for the application.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
I've heard all of the debate and I vote against the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Hallway.
I've heard all of the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
I'm going to abstain, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
I have heard all of the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Panel. Councillor Panel. I'll come back.
I'm here now. Sorry, I have heard all the debate and I vote in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Pringle.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Chair, that is 10 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. Abstaining.
Thank you very much, members. That application is approved. It was a long debate. We will now have a 10-minute break, and if you could be back at 20 to 1, please. Quick comfort break for everyone, and then see you back.